He was expecting to find a man and his two sons, but what he found was a dead man.
There's blood on a lampshade. There's blood nearby. So he died very violently.
After Terry King's body was discovered in the house, people realized his boys were missing.
I was in my office the morning after the murder when I got a call from the sheriff's department telling me the boys had confessed to the murder.
Finding this notebook prompts police to look into Rick Chavis's background.
We have to take the blame for him.
It's real simple. They killed him. They confessed that they killed him. She wanted to keep Alex, and he wanted to get rid of Terry King.
It just seemed so convenient for them to blame Ricky Chavis.
Tonight I'm in Cantonment, Florida, a rural town in the Florida Panhandle near Pensacola and the Alabama border. The town is just a few streets wide, but back in 2002, it became known for one of Florida's most notorious murders and a trial that gripped the nation. It all started just down the road with the report of a house fire.
There's a house directly behind me. My rig is on fire.
Neighbor sees the house on fire. It's an older home built in the 1940s, I believe. And so the neighbor calls the fire department. They come in and they put the fire out. And one of the first firefighters in the scene starts going through the house. And it's dark. There's soot everywhere. There's still smoke in the room. He was expecting to find, hopefully, a man and his two sons. But what he found was a dead man and no sign of the two sons.
They think at first that it was the fire that killed him because he's sitting up and there's something about the way he's sitting that make them think that he might have died from smoke inhalation. But they see his head injury and there's blood on a lampshade, there's blood nearby, so he died very violently. So they soon determine that this is not an accidental death, that this is in fact a murder.
The man in the recliner was identified as 40-year-old Terry King.
Terry King was a single dad to two little boys, Alex and Derek. Derek was the older one, he was 13, and Alex was the younger one, he was 12.
After Terry King's body was discovered in the house, people realized his boys were missing. Did they meet a similar fate to their dad? Were they kidnapped? Did they run away?
There was some concern that they were in danger.
But then just 2 days after their father was found brutally murdered, Alex and Derek King walked unharmed into the Escambia County Sheriff's Office behind me, brought in by a friend of the family, Ricky Chavis.
And he brings them to the police station, and there they're interviewed by the police.
Okay, this is going to be a recorded statement being taken at the Escambia County Sheriff's Department.
And what Alex and Derek tell police is absolutely horrifying.
They basically confessed to the murder of their own father. Derek says that he beat his father over the head with a bat. And Alex says that he's the one that gave Derek the idea that they should kill their dad.
David Rimmer was an assistant DA assigned to homicide cases at the time.
I was in my office the morning after the murder when I got a call from the sheriff's department telling me the boys were there and that the boys had confessed to the murder. It was determined that since the evidence supported first-degree murder, we had to take it to a grand jury. The grand jury returned an indictment of first-degree murder. They were not old enough under the law to be subject to the death penalty. So if convicted of first-degree murder, they were looking at life in prison with no parole.
This case had a lot of media interest because it involved these two little boys. And because they were charged as adults in Florida, you could show them. You could take pictures of them. You could put them on camera. And they really looked like little boys.
People were so interested in it. It was national news crews, it was international news crews, satellite trucks lined up down the block, reporters covering the lawn in front of the courthouse.
There was a ridiculous amount of press coverage.
Sharon Potter Wilson was hired to represent Derek King.
They were way too young to give a lot of explanation. So we had to look at bits and pieces and try to put the picture together the best that we could.
That included visiting the scene of the murder, where they discovered shocking new evidence that showed the crime in an entirely new light.
We found a notebook of Alex's that was left on the kitchen table.
There was a handwritten letter from Alex in which he was talking about how much he was in love with Ricky Chavis, how he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Ricky Chavis.
Ricky Chavis, the helpful friend of the family who brought the boys in to confess.
Ricky and Terry King were friends. They got to know each other when they lived in the same trailer park. And Ricky was a handyman. He was a mechanic.
News crews started following Chavis, who let them into his home.
He is the fix-it guy for the neighborhood, and he's also the hangout for the boys in the neighborhood because they could tinker on the cars. They would come in, they would play video games.
Ricky took a particular liking to Alex.
Terry King couldn't always watch his child while he was working, so Ricky was like, I'll help you. Put me on the sign-out sheet at his school. I'll watch him after school.
Finding this notebook prompts police to look further into Rick Chavis's background. And this background includes criminal convictions for having inappropriate relationships with the boys. And there is a criminal record that he has of having molested boys in his past.
Armed with this new information, police take another look at Chavis's behavior after the murder.
He didn't call the police to say, I've got these boys, they've just killed their dad. Instead, he takes them back to his trailer, he washes their clothes, he hides them out, and supposedly all to help the boys, but who's that really helping?
And then, as suspicions of Chavis grew, Alex and Derek changed their story.
They were now claiming that their confessions were fabricated, that in fact it was Ricky Chavis who committed the murder, and convinced them to confess. And when I started hearing this and knowing what I knew about Ricky Chavis at that particular point, it looked like it might be something that I might ought to present to the grand jury. And so I did, and they indicted him as well.
Once the boys changed their stories, the prosecutor is faced with two theories of the murder. On one hand, Ricky Chavis is the mastermind, and the boys are the victims. In the other theory, the boys are the mastermind, and Ricky is the accomplice. But he's got to try them separately, so it creates two trials, and he tries Ricky first and the boys after.
When we return, Ricky Chavis goes on trial as the mastermind behind the murder of Terry King.
I had the testimony of all of his inconsistent stories, his lies, his relationship with Alex, which was, the motive on my theory, because he wanted to be with Alex. He wanted to keep Alex, and he wanted to get rid of Terry King.
Ricky Chavis, a convicted sex offender who prosecutors say was sexually abusing 11-year-old Alex King, went on trial here in late August of 2002 for the murder of Terry King.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My theory of the case was that Chavis was the one, by his actions, his words, his conduct, encouraged the boys to kill their father so that he can maintain his sexual relationship with Alex.
Ricky Chavis says they had a lot of freedom.
He didn't have any physical evidence that Ricky Chavis did it. And in fact, the evidence was in the confessions of the boys that they killed their father.
So what I expect them to say today is that their confessions to the police were in fact lies.
I had to call them to the stand to testify as to Chavis's involvement.
Derek, do you know Ricky Chavis?
Yes, sir.
See him in this courtroom?
Yes, sir.
Did you point to him and describe what he's wearing?
He's wearing a dark suit, sitting over there.
According to Derek, Chavis devised a plan to help the two boys run away. The night of the murder, he told them to unlock the door to their house.
What was your dad doing the last time you saw him before you went to sleep?
Telling us to go to bed.
Were you awakened by someone?
Yes, sir.
Who?
Rick.
Ricky told the boys to be as quiet as possible, and the three of them crept by Terry King, who was asleep on the recliner.
We all walked to the back door. He said go to his car, that he'd catch up to us in a minute. And so we went to the Crunker's car and we hid.
Derek and Alex then waited in the trunk of Ricky's car until he returned. Ricky then drove them to his house and once inside, told them what had happened.
He said that there was a big fight and that he had to kill him.
Did he say what happened after he killed him?
He set the fire to his house.
Did he ask you and Alex to do anything for him?
He said that that we have to take the blame for him because he promised his mom right before she died that he would never get locked up again.
Alex's testimony was highly anticipated and riveting.
Would you state your name, please?
Alex King.
How old are you?
13.
His story at trial was that this was all Ricky's idea.
What happened when you got to Rick's house?
Well, he took us inside, said that there had been a fight, said there had been an accident, said that my dad was dead, and said that he had done it for us. Like, my dad would have killed us before he let us go live with him.
Did Rick want you to come and live with him?
Yes, sir.
He had a picture of Alex taped to the headboard of his bed. When he was in custody, they found a picture of Alex in the pocket of his jumpsuit right next to his heart. It was obvious that Chavis was obsessed with Alex.
Alex, did you have a sexual relationship with Ricky Chavis?
Yes, sir.
How long had it been going on before your father's death?
Well, a long time.
I just remember Alex getting up there and being so tiny and so little, and his little tiny little boy voice talking about how he thought that he was in love with Ricky Chavis.
Did you write some notes and letters about how you felt about Ricky Chavis?
Yes, sir.
Alex testified that Ricky Chavis had helped the boys run away from their father just a week before he was murdered.
Now, when Rick came and picked you up on November the 16th, did you tell him you were running away from home?
Yes, sir.
Where did he take you and your brother Derek?
He took us to his house.
I believe you testified you wanted to be with Rick.
Because he let me play video games and stuff. Like, he had a game machine. It was fun over at his house, I guess.
He basically let them do whatever they want, but his real interest was in molesting Alex.
Where would Ricky Chavis have sex with you?
Several places.
Did he ever have sex with you at his home?
Yes, sir.
He appeared very uncomfortable talking about the relationship that he had with Ricky Chavis. He was being probed for details because they wanted to make it clear that there was a motive here. Ricky had the motive to be with Alex King. When you look at how he was treated by Ricky Chavis and grooming him to be his lover, it was sickening. When Alex gave those details from his own mouth, it was clear that he was being manipulated and he was being groomed by a pedophile.
You know how long you stayed there at his house after you ran away from home?
About a week.
That entire week, Terry King was desperately looking for his boys.
Terry King is doing everything you would expect a worried father to do. He's putting up missing poster signs. He's talking to his friends. He goes to Ricky Chavis's trailer and he asks him, have you seen my boys? And Ricky says no. And so Ricky lies straight to Terry King's face that he doesn't know where his sons are.
In fact, they were literally right underneath his nose.
The trap door was in the floor of his mobile home. You could get down in there and you could sleep in there, and it was like a little hideout. They were there, but Chavis told them they were not.
The boys had run away for a week. When they returned to their father, Terry King begins to suspect that Ricky Chavis knows more than he's letting on. And after the boys came back, Terry went to the school and removed Ricky Chavis from the list of people who were allowed to pick up his children.
Ricky Chavis had a motive to kill Terry King once Terry King forbid Alex from seeing him again.
I had the testimony of all of his inconsistent stories, his lies, his relationship with Alex, which was the motive on my theory, because he wanted to be with Alex. He wanted to keep Alex, and he wanted to get rid of Terry King.
Mr. Terry King literally got his brains beat out with a baseball bat. Now, the question is, did Chavis do it, or did the King boys do it? It's up to you to decide which is the best evidence. My only concern is that justice be done. That's my only concern.
Coming up, the defense takes aim at the shifting story of Alex and Derek King.
During their testimony, it just seemed so convenient for them to blame Ricky Chavis and absolve themselves of killing their father.
The prosecution had relied heavily on the King brothers to make their case against Ricky Chavis. But that testimony differed drastically from what the boys told police directly after the murder, that they alone had killed their father.
In some way, Ricky's defense attorney had the upper hand because he had the boys' confession.
The boys just had so many details from their confession that would indicate that they were actually there.
Mike Rollo was the defense attorney for Ricky Chavis.
The evidence is going to show, and I think you're going to find, that in fact, their earlier detailed, chilling confessions to the police about what they did is going to convince you who the actual perpetrators are here.
The defense wasted no time tying the boys to their initial statement.
In your statements to the investigator, Alex, do you remember telling them that you felt mainly responsible because Derek took the hits, but you were the one who gave him the idea?
I did say that.
Watching their testimony, it seemed coached at times.
And if you told the investigators that you hit your father in the head with a bat and he moaned, at which time you kept hitting him about 10 times, you wouldn't disagree that you told him that, right?
If it's in my statement, I wouldn't disagree.
Okay. But all that statement's really made up, right?
Yes.
And it's just to protect Rick Chavis, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Rollo focused in on Derek's role in particular. The bat used to kill Terry King was never found, but the lawyer armed himself with one found in the King's front yard and used it to impress upon the jury what Alex initially said Derek had done.
Who encourages, plans, and Alex sees his brother take a bat, not unlike this, and smash his father's brains in. Could a kid do this? Could a kid pick up an aluminum bat and apply that much force to kill their father?
To answer that question, Rollo called Reggie Jernigan to the stand, a deputy sheriff and friend of Ricky Chavis, who was present for the boys' first statement to the police.
How long have you known Rick Chavis?
About 82, 84.
Have you ever known him to be a violent person, or is he a peaceful man?
No, never.
According to Jernigan, it was Derek who was the violent one.
Was there an occasion when you were having your vehicle serviced or worked on where you saw Alex and Derek King with a sledgehammer striking a vehicle over at Mr. Chavis's?
Yes, I did. That was Derek King. And as I pulled up, I saw this boy out there with a sledgehammer, and he was just beating the car, going all around it, up on top of it, just going at it. Like somebody possessed, he was just beating it.
Somebody possessed?
Yes.
Possessed of what?
I have no idea.
The defense wanted to persuade the jury that at least Derek was very capable of committing this murder.
The next witness Rollo called was Frank Lay, father of the foster family Derek lived with for much of his life.
Derek King was with the Lay family for about 7 years, from the time that he was 5 till I think he was 12 years old.
How did he fit with the family?
Well, he had trouble engaging with our family in the sense that he, would had problem telling the truth to start with, and we expect that and demand that.
Did he seem to have a fascination with fire?
Yeah, I would say yes, because when he first came and we'd do a little fire out in the yard or something, it would be tough to keep him out of the middle of it, literally. He just was too engrossed in it.
Did you feel like it was a threat to your household, that he needed to be kept away from lighters and matches?
Yeah, we forbid him from having any kind of matches or lighter or anything like that.
Did it finally reach a point where you decided this wasn't going to work?
Yes, we have 6 grandchildren, and we were just getting concerned about his lack of ability to discipline himself at school, at home, and so we started to make efforts toward finding him either a military school or a boys' home or something that would be able to deal with his problems 24/7.
That's when Terry King stepped in and agreed to take Derek back.
Derek came home from school on a Friday afternoon, and Mrs. Lay came to see him up in his bedroom and said that he was going back to live with his father, and she had packed his stuff, and 30 minutes later, Derek was gone. That was the only family that he really knew, and they basically threw him out to go live with his father and his brother, who he did not know.
This is a man who's barely getting by on minimum wage, so he doesn't have all the toys and the clothes and the lavish lifestyle that he enjoyed with his foster family.
Within weeks, with the help of Ricky Chavis, Derek had run away. He eventually ended up back at his old foster home.
The girl's house there that he knew from the high school, and their parents called and let us know. So we went over, and that was the first time we'd seen him in about 5 or 6 weeks. He proceeded to tell me that his dad was a control freak and that he just couldn't live there anymore, and that he just couldn't stand it. I said, if it's so bad there, if things are so bad, Alex has lived there all this time. I said, Alex doesn't seem to mind. And Derek said, Alex hates my dad. He hates him. He said he'd like to see him dead.
Just a few days later, Terry King was dead.
Rick Chavis was a person who had care and concerns of the children foremost in his mind. He did help them after they did what they did. He did pick them up. There's no doubt about that. Did he know they were going to do it? I don't think there's going to be any real evidence that he knew they were going to do it. They carried out their plan. It was their plan. It was a senseless killing to most normal people, but in their minds, it solved their problem. It got them away from their father, and that's what they wanted to do.
When we return, the jury decides Chavis's fate, but the judge seals their decision.
After the jury reached its verdict in the Ricky Chavis case, the judge sealed the verdict so that people would not know what the verdict was, so it would not affect the outcome of the King brothers trial.
The jury had reached a verdict in the trial of Ricky Chavis for the murder of Terry King, but the judge had ordered their decision sealed until after the King brothers were tried for the same murder. The trial of Alex and Derek King began here in the first week of September 2002. The young age of the two brothers attracted worldwide media attention. and advocates from across the country.
They felt like this was an example of a case where Florida's criminal justice system was failing, that these boys shouldn't be tried as adults. People came out of the woodwork to either be a part of this case or to support these boys.
I came across Court TV, and there were these two young children on television in the courtroom with their lawyers.
Lisa Drew Alton drove with her husband from Southwest Missouri to Pensacola to support the boys.
We had people from all over the United States.
In a strange twist, after arguing that Ricky Chavis was guilty of killing Terry King, David Rimmer now found himself trying to prove that it was actually the King brothers who carried out the murder.
The facts were easier in their case than it was in Chavis's case.
The police will tell you that when they questioned the two boys confessed to the murder of their father.
And their trial, it's real simple. They killed him. They confessed that they killed him. The evidence supports that confession. The challenge was that they looked so innocent. Two young kids that looked like little Sunday school angels. That was hard.
If you'd raise your right hand, please, we'll have the clerk swear you.
And it was the boy's initial confession that Rimmer made his star witness.
I had their recorded statements, which I played for the jury. You know, I didn't need any witnesses other than their own statements that they made.
I tell the jury what happened then after Derek and Alex were brought to the sheriff's department.
They were brought in by Mr. Chavis and Officer Jernigan. We soon eventually started interviewing them.
Alex told investigators that their father was enraged after the boys returned from running away.
Harry called me into the green room, and he was talking about it, and he grabbed me by the wrist and threw me into the ground.
And he said that after Terry had pushed him down, that he and Derek went to another room, and he told Derek, "I wish he was dead."
That's when Alex said he and Derek started scheming to kill their father.
So we looked for a hammer, we couldn't find one. He pulled his bat out. Well, we could use that. And I thought about it, and I figured out that it would be a better choice.
Derek said the boys then waited until their father had fallen asleep on the recliner outside of their bedroom.
You know about how long that was?
5 or 10 minutes, somewhere around there.
It was Alex who set the plan in motion.
He was like, "You better go ahead and do it if you're going to do it."
The boys crept out of their bedroom with Derek in the lead. Their father was sitting in a recliner with his feet propped up. Once they were certain he was asleep, Derek approached while Alex looked on.
And what's particularly shocking is the crime itself.
When Derek got close enough, he raised the baseball bat over his head and came down hard.
The details that both children give are very graphic.
First time so he felt like a little crack in there, hitting concrete or something. And then I was afraid that he might wake up and see us, so I just kept on hitting him. But my anger just was so overwhelming that I just did what I thought was right.
Alex discusses details about what he sees and hears.
Every time he made contact, blood comes from his head. He smashed his face in, he hits him in the back, makes contact with the left side, and makes contact with the forehead, knocks a hole in the forehead. You can see his brains. By the time he got done, he was still trying to breathe. And made sort of like a sound like the person has a slightly stopped up nose.
He hears his father make gurgling sounds, and so they fear that he's still alive. And so Derek has to hit him a couple more times.
Then the boys decided after they killed their dad that they were going to start a fire to cover up the crime.
Threw the bat on the bed, lit the bed on fire.
The boys flee the house and spend the night in the woods. The next afternoon, Alex says he called Ricky Chavis from a nearby payphone.
Then we went to his house. We got cleaned up and we took a shower. And then we waited for Reggie to come pick us up and take us here.
The pathologist who conducted the autopsy said there's no way they could have known all of those details about the body and what was happening as he was dying unless they were there.
Coming up, while their detailed confessions appear damning, some odd inconsistencies hint that someone else may have been present at the scene of the murder.
There was accelerant throughout the house, and they never talk about that. So that's one of those things that made people think, well, Ricky Chavis was there. Maybe he is the one that set the fire.
This is an innocent woman. She didn't do it.
It's a controversial case that's divided a community.
Karen Reed is accused of murdering her police officer boyfriend.
Prosecutors say she ran him over on purpose and left him to die in the cold.
But Reed claims that she's being framed.
It smells suspicious.
After years of legal fireworks, will the truth finally be revealed?
The end game is to figure out who killed John O'Keefe and hold these people responsible.
The Killer or Cover-Up Murder Trial. Live coverage weekday mornings, only on Court TV.
With Alex and Derek facing potential life sentences, the defense tries to return attention to the person they say had the real motive to murder Terry King.
Ricky Chavis is very afraid of some things because during the week that they've been a runaway, they've been less secretive about their physical relationship. And Derek has been allowed to watch as this 40-year-old pedophile sits Alex on his lap and kisses him.
According to the defense, Ricky panicked when Derek was picked up by police after running away.
Derek might say something that would lead back to the discovery of this relationship, which Ricky Chavis knows will end his free existence for the rest of his life. Alex is told one thing: what we need is to get Derek back, and here's how we will do it. I will take you back at midnight Sunday night. You will open the back door and I will come and get you.
Midnight. It was a time that both boys mentioned to Mike Tyson, one of the last people to see Terry King alive.
When they came over at 5 o'clock and Terry had both children with him for the first time in about a week, did everybody seem to be happy?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Tyson, you've been asked several times. The boys expressed a desire to get home, but they needed to get home at a particular time. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And that time was, in fact, midnight, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
In fact, a familiar face admitted to being at the King's home around midnight.
Mr. Chavis told you that he was out there immediately prior to the murder, correct?
Yes, I believe so.
There was no physical evidence that Ricky Chavis was there that night or that he was a part of the killing, but I think a lot of people speculated that perhaps he was, just because there were a few inconsistencies with what the boys described that night.
One inconsistency was the boys' story about when Chavis picked them up.
In the woods, there's a trail that led to a little camp here at Turnpike thing that the night in before, the first time there. And so we stayed there for a couple of nights.
A couple of nights. Derek, too, tells investigators a similar story.
Went to the very back of that subdivision in the woods, and we just stayed there.
Okay. And how long were you there?
2 days. Well, 2 nights.
Okay.
The only problem with the story? The boys were lying. It was the same lie that Chavis initially told police.
First, he told you they were in Pace and you picked them up there.
Yes.
Then later, he admitted that they'd actually stayed at his store and they had his house and you picked them up the night of the murder.
Yes.
That would have given Chavis an entire day more to influence the boys' statement. The brothers got other important details wrong in their confession.
The boys leave out some fairly significant facts that we now know from the fire investigation that you're very well aware of, correct?
And what may that be?
The use of accelerants.
We asked them about that.
The workbench You had talked about it earlier. There was some lighter fluids and stuff. Tell us about that.
We didn't use any of it. We didn't lighter. We just looked at that because we knew the house was very vulnerable because it was so old.
Derek never mentions accelerants either.
Threw the bat on the bed, lit the bed on fire.
Did you light anything else on fire?
I tried to light the rug at the front door, but I don't think I did.
If it wasn't Alex or Derek, then someone else had absolutely drenched the area from the bed to the door in an explosive fluid.
I would say from the bed to the door, you're looking at approximately 10 feet in length, and width-wise, probably 4.5 feet at its furthest point.
So if a person who poured this accelerant had walked over to the bed area of this room and threw a match on it, could they safely have gotten to the door, or can you tell?
Based on what I see in this room, I do not believe that the person would have ignited it from the bed because they would be standing in the accelerant that was on the floor. Thus, they would be burned.
And when you're saying burn, can you tell anything further than they would have been burned?
Well, they would have been standing in the fire. And I don't know what extent they would have been burned, but it would have been serious damage, I'm sure.
The defense even used the bloodiness of the crime scene to cast doubt on the brothers' involvement.
Was there a considerable amount of blood spatter on the walls?
Yes.
Was there blood flung nearly 12 feet away?
Yes.
Against a far wall? Was there blood slung on the ceiling?
Yes, sir.
With so much blood, it seems reasonable that some of it would end up in the trunk of the car where the boys said they rode after Chavis picked them up. But investigators found only a single spot to analyze.
And that analysis proved to be false, correct?
Yes.
So there was no blood in the trunk. Is that correct?
Based upon the DNA analysis, yes.
But investigators failed to test a key part of the car for blood.
Did you send any samples from the steering wheel or the front seat off for testing?
I don't believe so. I don't have that report right in front of me, but I don't think so.
Once they had the confession from the boys, they wanted to suggest that they stopped investigating, and they didn't do more to corroborate the confessions to the crime scene.
I asked if Rick Chavis had picked him up or if he was involved in any way.
Yes. We asked them. They told us no, so we accepted that at face value, and we let Mr. Chavis go, correct?
Yeah, we sent him home that night.
Ricky just gets to throw his hands up and say, well, I'm just a dumb old boy trying to help. If you really are the family friend and you're trying to help these boys, why would you bring them in to confess? Why wouldn't you call a defense attorney first? Why would you just waltz them into the sheriff's office and have them sit down and be like, yes, I killed my dad. We beat him until we heard the death rattle. It just seemed too convenient for Ricky as well.
Court TV.
After a short 3-day trial that gripped the nation, the jury was ready to reveal the King brothers' fate.
State of Florida plaintiff versus Derek King defendant. Verdict: guilty of second-degree murder, a lesser-included offense, without a weapon. State of Florida plaintiff versus Alex King defendant. Verdict: guilty of second-degree murder, a lesser-included offense, without a weapon.
The verdict meant the boys would be locked up in an adult prison for at least 20 years before becoming eligible for parole.
It was not so well received on the part of the public. The public sentiment was that had it not been for Ricky Chavis, this would not have happened.
The public anger grew when the jury's decision in the Chavis trial was revealed.
We, the jury, find as follows as to count 1 of the indictment: not guilty.
When it came back that the boys were convicted and Ricky Chavis wasn't, I think it was just this feeling of, what? Is this really what happened? Is this justice? And that's when members of the jury start telling the press, we don't even really think the boys killed their dad.
I heard later on that they found him guilty of the lesser charge because they believed that Chavis was the real killer and that they helped Chavis.
Faced with a jury that didn't believe its own verdict, the judge made a striking decision.
It was unprecedented. The judge set aside the King brothers' verdict, in part because the prosecution had brought two different theories of the case, one being that Ricky Chavis was the murderer, and the other being that the King brothers were the murderers.
The judge then made another decision almost unheard of in a murder trial and sent the case into mediation.
The defense came to the agreement that the boys would plead guilty to third-degree murder.
I think the judge took an impossible situation and he turned it into something that was a much more palatable scenario going forward than any of us had ever anticipated.
Derek is sentenced to 8 years and served 7. Alex served 6 years of his 7-year sentence.
After getting out, the brothers lived briefly at a ranch owned by Dan Daly, described by the media as a haven for children who kill their parents. Lisa Drew Alton traveled there to meet Derek.
He loved Dan's place. Dan lived out in the middle of the desert near Terlingua, Texas, in an open-air house that was off the grid. He was delightful. I never felt afraid. I never felt threatened by him. He was always very respectful and kind.
Molly Barrows kept in touch with Derek for several years.
He did get married. He did have children. He served some time in prison for crimes related to his family. And then Alex, I think, has also struggled.
Part of that struggle came from readjusting to life after being in prison for 7 years. He became addicted to opioids, and his family says he never really recovered. After our interview, Molly Barrows wrote her last article about Alex. On April 24th, he died of a massive heart attack caused by a drug overdose. But what about the man who many believe was equally responsible for Terry King's death? In a subsequent trial, Chavis was also found not guilty of sexually abusing Alex.
They go after him a third time. This time, they charge him with accessory after the fact and tampering with evidence.
No matter what anybody thought of Alex, Chavis was hiding him from his father, hiding him from the police, and Chavis had washed their clothes and had them take showers and get all cleaned up. I mean, that was undisputed. Those facts were undisputed.
Tried as an accomplice after the fact, Chavis was convicted. He was sentenced to the maximum 30 years in prison.
Ricky Chavis is in a prison right here close to home in Milton, which is a community just outside of Pensacola. And right now he's scheduled to get out in about 10 years.
Terry King lies in a graveyard not far from where he was killed.
On Terry King's tombstone is his date of birth as well as the day that he died. And it also says, "Love you, Alex and Derek." He was a loving father. He did the best he could with what he had.